This is the 2018 Lexus 4-wheel drive LX570. The Lexus LX is their largest SUV, and boy is it spacious and well equipped. It sits up high, has lots of gadgets, and is a pretty fun drive. This model is courtesy of our friends at Jim Hudson Lexus. This model is in atomic silver and with Cabernet leather and linear espresso wedgewood. This SUV has just about every bell and whistle, included heated and air-conditioned seats, built-in rear seat DVDs, lane assist, a Mark Levinson audio system, and a built-in six-pack cooler. And that's right, I said a built-in six-pack cooler for all your Diet Cokes and stuff, I guess, right? Oh, and did I forget to mention, this vehicle lowers itself for you to get in and out. Wow, I had no idea that was even an option that existed in the auto industry. This vehicle also comes with 383 horsepower V8 with a tow capacity of 7,000 pounds. If you have $100,000 to spend on your next vehicle, I'll do you a favor and save you $200, as this one can be purchased for $99,800. Hi, I am Jordan Stallings with our new show, Brokers in Cars, Talking Contracts. Each week, we will ride around in some cool cars with some somewhat cool real estate brokers and chat about the contract. Today, our guest is Craig Summerall from Exit Real Estate Consultants in Lexington. Our firm has represented Craig for many years, and Craig is also the president of the CMLS. Since I can never seem to get our Lexington friends to cross the bridge, I decided to take a trip out to see Craig. Craig, what's on your mind, man? How you been?
Oh, been doing good. It's busy just like everybody else is.
Good.
Was hoping we could talk about some sections of the contract today that first deals with access to the property.
Yeah.
And utilities being on. What's required there, and what's the contract say about that?
Well, just specifically, we're looking at paragraph 8. So paragraph 8, the one is the paragraph that requires the seller to actually allow access to the property for inspections.
Right.
And also, just to add to that, utilities must be operational. So we see that quite often where a seller says, sorry, I've had the water off for so long, but hey, contract requires that they be operational. So it's one of those things that you got to do.
Right. And does that also include re-inspections and, let's say, a final inspection? Because, when we request work to be done, whether we have an invoice or not, the buyer's got the opportunity to go back in and re-inspect. So same holds true for re-inspections?
Absolutely. Paragraph 8 is going to allow for both of those, re-inspections and even a final walkthrough.
Gotcha. Now, who is responsible for any damage that might be caused during an inspection?
That would be, so paragraph 8 defines this as well, that's going to be the buyer's responsibility. So if the buyer gets an inspector in there and they cause damage, it's going to be the buyer's responsibility.
And I'm assuming that this kind of goes along with my next question, which would be, why do we define an inspector in paragraph 8?
We do that because we want professionals in the house, of course. We don't want Joe Blow in there trying to make his opinions about the property. One thing I will add to that, though, just to keep in mind, and we'll get into this a little bit if you want to talk about paragraph 9 and 10 as well, but under the due diligence in paragraph 9, it does not actually require inspections to terminate during the due diligence period. So you actually don't even need inspections whatsoever in that first 10 days. If the buyer walks in the house and says, it just smells funny, I don't want to buy it anymore, they can do that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm glad you mentioned that, because I still see a lot of folks today believe that you have to have inspections in order to terminate a contract.
Yeah, they ask the sellers, like, well, we want to see the inspection report. Well, sorry, we didn't get one. We just don't want to buy the house anymore.
Exactly. Can you talk about the difference in paragraph 10A and 10B and when you might use one over the other?
Absolutely. So we see this probably more rare than, of course, we do the parties using revision 9. But in paragraph 10 and A and B, that would be when the seller is selling the property as is. 10A provides for a due diligence period, though, and allows for inspections. It doesn't mean, of course, that the seller has to make any of the repairs, but it at least allows the buyer to know what they're getting into.
Right.
10B is not going to allow that at all. It's, hey, you're buying it as is. You can get an inspection if you want, but you can't be let out of the contract. So that's kind of the big difference between those two. So at the contract signing of 10B, buyer's committed to buying the property regardless of what they find.
Yeah, so regardless of what they find and no option to terminate.
That's exactly right.
I think
be careful with 10B.
I think there's also some confusion about that as well. And so going kind of along with that, why does paragraph 11 not apply to those as-is closings?
Yeah, paragraph 11, of course, right after the as-is we were just talking about, requires that the property be maintained in a similar condition up to the date of closing. Problem is, though, that doesn't apply if you use 10A or B. And the reason why that doesn't apply is because if you're committing to buy the property as is, something breaks along the way or gets damaged, you know, seller's not going to be required to have to fix that.
Gotcha.
I think a lot of people forget that. So they say, oh, well, there's nicks in the floor that weren't there when we inspected it. Well, you were committed to buying the property as is under 10A or B. Sorry, can't help you if you pass your due diligence window in 10A.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, a lot of inherent risks, I guess, if you're going the as-is route in a contract.
Just in wrapping this up too, with these paragraphs we're talking about, if you're a newer agent or even a seasoned agent and you haven't read it in a while, read paragraph 9, because that's the most commonly used paragraph when we're talking about when we're talking about due diligence period and options for the buyer. So if they find a defect in the house, whether they're going to require the seller to make it, whether the seller has to make those repairs, how the contract addendums are going to flow after that, repair addendums. I think it's very important for everyone to read that section in full.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm sure you train your agents up on that one all the time.
Absolutely. So if someone doesn't buy it as is, what happens if something breaks, after you've done inspections and you have negotiated the repair addendum? Let's say it's just you've gone through your 10-day due diligence and all that. Something breaks in the house. What's the seller's obligation there?
That's going to be paragraph 11 again. The seller's going to be obligated to repair or make it right. So at the day of signing the contract, if something changes in a major way, paragraph 11 is going to require that the seller make those corrections and get it back to the condition the property was in at the beginning.
Which leads me to my last question, because I've seen this in my office a couple times. Let's say that there's some damage that was hidden in a property and you might not see it until the day before closing, your final walkthrough. It was hidden by furniture, it was hidden by a rug. How does that play out?
It's going to be the seller's problem. The seller's going to have to fix it. It actually says that in paragraph 11, so I think it's important to point that out, because sure, there's furniture in the way, there's when those get moved, when the seller goes to vacate and get possession right before closing, and we find there's a big hole in the hardwood floors, that's going to have to be repaired by the seller.
Yeah, I know. I've personally had some instances where that's been the case, but I think it's always good for folks to know what the options are.
Absolutely. Well, that's great. I hope everyone has learned a lot there, and I know your agents certainly are trained up on this, but get this video out to everybody and let them take a look and see for themselves what paragraphs 8, 9, and 10, and 11 are all about.
All right, sounds good. Thank you. Thanks for the ride.
Thank you, sir. Absolutely.